Even though Travon Walker got signed to a massive deal, I don't think the Jaguars are done at edge, and I'll tell you why and who here on Locked On Jaguars.
You are Locked On Jaguars, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
It is, in fact, your team every day here on Locked On Jaguars. I'm Tony Wiggins, the host of the Locked On Jaguars podcast, and here's what we have for you on today's show. Do they stay or do they go? We'll discuss that in segment number 3 after we tell you a player for now and later, one guy. But first, we're going to start at finding the edge for depth. That's where we're going to park this thing and get going here on Locked On Jaguars. A lot has been made of Travon Walker getting a 4-year deal for $110 million, which is an extension to the 1-year, $15 million fifth-year option with $77 million guaranteed added to the $15 million guaranteed. That's $92 million guaranteed, which means the Jaguars are ultra committed to Travon Walker as they should be, and that's a lot of money. Josh Allen also makes a lot of money on the other side. The Jaguars said they need to improve their pass rush. They have 2-3 techniques on their team. They did not go into free agency and change anything in the interior. What does that mean? Being committed to those edge rushers the way they are and not making any movement in terms of your interior pass rush, does it mean that they're up for a trade? Does it mean that they may still be looking around at the veteran market or a trade for maybe even the Dexter Lawrence, a nose tackle who can actually push the pocket? It could mean we're just keeping our options open. But one thing I can tell you, when I look at the Jacksonville Jaguars depth chart as I did today, and I tried to find, okay, really tell me, what do they need? And I know need is a word that's thrown around a lot in the draft world based on, does this guy need to come in and start right now? And that's not going to happen for an edge rusher who gets chosen here in Jacksonville unless the Jacksonville Jaguars are just bad at optics and bad at figuring things out. How can you start a player when you got two guys with a total of $260 million already at the edge position? It's simple economics, right? But here's the deal. They do need to improve pass rush. They do need to improve getting quarterbacks off the field on third down. We can argue all day about whether or not pressures are good enough from the two that we have, or whether or not Travon Walker is just a complete football player who is just not the kind of edge rusher that some people prefer. We can bring up all of those things, but the bottom line is it has to get done, right? So what I'm trying to do is offer you solutions today where that can get done. You don't mess up the hierarchy of the team. You don't basically step on yourself and hustle backwards by going out and getting another $100 million guy and one of them is sitting over there on the bench, or you're going into some weird formation where you can be taken advantage of because you got too many 265-pound guys on the field. So what I've come up with is this. There are two scenarios. The Jaguars can absolutely sit at number 56. All right, so that's where the do they stay or do they go, because I'm going to give you some options. They can sit at number 56, or they can draft for the future with the anticipation of the fact that it's football and guys get banged up, the fact that you can never have too many edge rushers, and the fact that at some point, if you move up in a draft and you get a guy on a 5th-year option, if you count 5 years from now, somebody's probably not here, and you have a dude that you can slide right in, right? So that's where we're going to go. We're going to go through that today, finding edge for depth. There are two scenarios in terms of the draft. The two scenarios are staying at 56 and seeing what guy comes down to you, right, based on your board. And then, like I said, moving up, using your second-round pick, a third and a fourth, or a second and 2/3, or whatever. Future picks. The Jaguars have a bunch of picks. I don't think they're going to use all of them. I think they're going to use some to move around and maybe even change a 5th from this year to a 4th next year, or a 5th and a 7th to a 4th, or a 5th, 2 5ths and a 6th to a 3rd in 2027. They have a bunch of things that they can do. But the scenario that I'm going to focus on today is The two that I'm going to focus on is, okay, if they move up, who will it be for? Who will be available? And if they don't. And both of these things kind of overlap in what will that player's role be, whether he's the 32nd pick or the 56th pick. It's going to be the same thing. One will just have the fifth-year option and the other one won't, right? And there's two players that I'm going to focus on that if they move up, these are the guys that they should go after. And I did a show yesterday where I talked about if they do move up and give up that capital, it has to be for a dude that they go, he's going to start. Remember, my man Chris Walker did send me some information, some clips where they talked about how the Jaguars, or it showed how the Jaguars had their draft picks in tiers. Super competitive, ready to go right now. Some guys are ready to go. That's easy scouting. Other guys have potential, but they need refinement. There's some other players that have a superpower, if you will, and some of those things are needed. Like I'll describe the player right now, Dennis Gardeck. He has a superpower, right? So he's not like great at everything where he's a full-time starter, but he is a core special teams player. He is an energizer bunny, and he does have some pass rush and ability to tackle in open space. Therefore, you take that guy as a superpower dude that gives you multiple positions and a whole bunch of flexibility. Then there's the high upside, not quite ready to play, but boy, if he ever gets it. So these are some of your day three guys, day two or day three guys, right? And then there's like, doesn't fit us scheme, nice guy, good person, just doesn't fit us. So it's not like the whole board is going to be open to the Jaguars. It's going to be very, very, very targeted. And this is where you can justify where you pick someone based on that information that you have. And it's not monolithic information that comes from around the league or other scouts. It basically comes from you, your people, the people that are willing to stand on the table, the people that are willing to say no, and the agreement that comes from everybody. And then what do they do for your team now or later? What do they add to your team? How do they make you better? How do they respond to competition? The Jaguars are one of those teams that, for the most part, I think 85% of the time that they've been in existence have always picked closer to the top than they have the bottom. Therefore, that means they were bad. And it also means that they needed instant help. If you look at good teams from around the league, got teams that take people in the late first round. Just think about George Karlaftis for the Chiefs. George Karlaftis, when he got drafted for a long time, wasn't even a full-time starter, but he was a designated pass rusher. He ended up getting a 4-year, $88, $92 million extension. So he may be a starter now, but at some point he wasn't, right? And whatever his weaknesses were, they allowed him to grow into him, and he did it, and then he got a contract extension. But he had a superpower, and that superpower was he was a great third down edge rusher who kept going with effort. So that's the kind of impact that you can expect when you pick late because you won so many games. You don't have to get a guy who's a starter, but you have to get a guy that prepares to be a starter, that won't pout if he doesn't start. He's a first-round pick, and he knows he's going to get everything that he earns and he deserves. And edge rusher is one of the priority positions along with offensive line, offensive tackle, perhaps wide receiver, but not in this situation for us. Perhaps corner, not in this situation for us. If there's a wild scenario where some safety that's highly overrated gets to the bottom of the first round, I could see them moving up for him too, especially a dude if they think he's an 8 to 10-year player. But for the most part, the positions that you would move up for, quarterback is one of them, and that's not going to happen. We know that. The positions that you would move up for have to be positions of value, or the person that plays a non-valuable position has to just be so good you cannot pass him up. You know he's going to be a 10-year starter, and half of those years he's going to get awards at the end of the year, and he makes your team better, like safety. So let's get into it. I'm going to talk about two first-round edge guys that if they start to fall to the late in the first round, and then I'll bring up a wild card, somebody I really, really like. Man, when I tell you I like Mason Reiger, I like Mason Reiger at 56 for some reasons that I'll discuss here in just a second on Locked On Jaguars. All right, today's show is brought to you and sponsored by BetterHelp. Financial stress is something a lot of people are carrying right now, man. And it's not just about numbers. It can affect your sleep, your relationships, and your overall mental health in ways that build up over time. And the reality is, struggling with money doesn't mean you failed. Sometimes it just means you haven't had the right kind of support. It's something I've thought about, and I've actually lived through it. I've had money. I've made decent money, but the prospect of continuing to do that, along with some health challenges I have, really did cause me to go into a state of depression where I had to go and seek therapy for better health. And it's easy to put a lot of pressure on yourself without really talking about it. That lack of sleep is something else, man. And sleep deprivation can really get to you. Therapy isn't about financial advice. It's about working through the stress, the anxiety, and emotions that come with it. With over 30,000 licensed therapists and more than 6 million people served, BetterHelp makes it easier to get matched and start focusing on what you need. When the life starts feeling overwhelming, therapy can help, man. Sign up and get 10% off at betterhelp.com/lockedon. That's better, HELP.com/lockedon. We're moving and grooving here on Locked On Jaguars. We thank you for joining us and making us your first listen. Make sure you tap into the Everydayers Club. The link is in the description wherever you watch or listen to this podcast. You'll get access to our merchandise, our Locked On branded merchandise that you can only get here, as well as access to our shows that go out to our audio partners that are ad-free. Make sure you tap into the Everydayers Club for a little bit more. And we appreciate you joining us here each and every day on Locked On Jaguars. There's a bonus episode coming up later on, an episode coming up later on that you guys can enjoy. And it'll be about guys that need to prove it this year. So make sure you don't miss that. But here today, we're talking about edge rushers. There are two guys that I believe have a shot to fall into the 20s. And it's for different reasons. One is Zion Young, who played at Missouri. And one of the reasons I say that is because Zion Young is he's sort of I wouldn't call him a poor man's, but if you put him in categories, like if there were menu items in a category, Zion Young would fall under the Josh Allen, Travon Walker, edge rusher category. And what that means is good player, strong, solid, good body, big, gets after it. Will give you a little bit of everything, can play the run, can play the pass, can rush the passer, long arms, upside through the roof. But none of that kind of matches the production that you've seen so far. His draft will be based on his workout, his tape to a certain extent, his draft potential, and then it'll be a lot of projection added to it. But he does play a premium position. You do know that the floor is extremely solid with him, and you know it's not going to be a bust candidate. You also know that you need a third edge rusher, a talented third edge rusher that you don't necessarily have to develop as much as you do someone else like BJ Green or Danny Strigo, a talented edge rusher that doesn't have as many weaknesses and as many holes, because those are the guys that end up playing the majority of the snaps for teams that win. And then maybe you unleash some pass rush too, through technique, through more confidence, through a little bit more development, and the things that you ask him to do that he may have not have been asked to do in college. The other thing it solves is if you move up and you get him for a 5th round option, they play right away and they help you right away, but it doesn't destroy the hierarchy and they don't sit and act entitled. They sit and they learn from those two guys in front of them. And then you look up, and in 3 or 4 years, whether it be through injury, attrition, or the fact that you have tough decisions to make, or maybe guys have fallen off a little bit, you'll have a replacement for one of your starters. In this case, it's Josh Hines Allen, who is the older player. And I'm not saying they'll run Josh off, but if Josh gets to the point where he can restructure his contract and towards the end of his career, get a little bit more money, still be a part of the team, but now kind of start splitting reps a little bit. And so we've seen this in the past with Osi Umenyiora, with Michael Strahan, and with Justin Tuck. They had 3 guys in New York when they were rushing the passer. And they all were, at some point, guys that were either starters. Of course, Michael Strahan's a Hall of Famer. But The other two guys were really, really good players. And depending on the situation, they might end up on the field at the same time. You have to look down the road for those opportunities, especially when you win 13 games and it looks like your roster from a too deep standpoint is solid and you've already paid a bunch of people. This is the thing with offensive tackle that I keep talking about. They paid Walker Little. And I know it wasn't this regime, but the Jaguars did. And now they run the Jaguars. So they paid Walker Little, they paid Cole Van Lannon, and they just got the fifth-year option on Anton Harrison. The only way that they would go out and get a player is if he is just lights out, and they would probably end up having to move somebody because of roster restrictions. In this case, they have room for a dude to come in right now and be the third edge rusher. So now I'm going to tell you who the second guy is. Akeem Mesidor, because he's 25 years old, and regardless of what people say about we ain't worried about that. We ain't worried about it. The scouts absolutely worried about that. Because if you want a guy to have a second contract, you got to understand that if you take him in the first round, by the time he gets to his second contract, he's going to be 30 years old. So you have to ask about the wear and tear on his body. You also have to ask, okay, well, if he's a down the road replacement, a guy that can help us now and replace a guy down the road, he's going to be 29 by the time he's a starter, 28 or 29 by the time he's a full-time starter here. That's a little bit late to be having to make a decision on somebody. So those are the guys that I think if you want them and you can move up into the first round and get them, you do it. If not, Mason Reiger. Now it looks like Reiger or Rieger, but it's not. It's pronounced Reiger. Mason Reiger, man. I got into this tape, and shout out to me O'Brien, the host of our squad show here. I got into this tape a little bit, and let me tell you something. Is he a first-round pick? Probably not. I could see New England doing it, though. I honestly could. I could see New England doing it. But he is a dude that I think will go into the second round because of his traits. He's 6'5", 251 pounds. Dude has big hands, man. 10 3/8, long arms, 32 5/8. But more important than that, a 10-yard split at 1.61 and a broad jump of 10.5 that tells you he's athletic. He's also long. He's played in space, and he's an edge guy. Here's where they talk about him being a short strider and needing to take more strides to get going and not necessarily a strong guy. So that sounds like a third edge rusher. He also is a dude that has a little duality because he's played standing up. So that position that Dennis Gardeck plays and that Yasir Abdullah plays and that Jalen McLeod plays, along with him being able to stand in line and put his hand on the dirt from a 9 wide spot, gives him duality. And it also gives him the twitch. The thing that he is extremely twitchy and fast. So when you talk about adding speed and you talk about adding suddenness and you talk about them having something different on third down, because you don't right off the bat, you don't want them in there on first and second down. So there's no illusions of grandeur. You can always work on those things to improve. But right now, bro, you come in here to rush the passer. You come in here to when we go to our freak formations where we have all of these different guys on the field, you're one of them. And we might need you to drop back and also cover the flat. We might need you to do that. We might need you to basically be Devin Lloyd without being Devin Lloyd as a starter. Some combinations between Devin Lloyd, Dennis Gardeck, and whoever we want to play on the end when we move Travon inside on third downs. That's where the value comes in for me, because he does have a superpower with his length and twitchiness. His superpower is also his versatility and the fact that you don't disrupt things if you bring him in. I want y'all to go check out that tape, man. So in just a second, I'm going to go over, do they stay or do they go? Well, that depends on who's doing the standing up on the tables over there. We'll talk about it in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars. All right, third and final segment here to go on Locked On Jaguars. We're talking about the edge rush position. I've given you scenarios where the Jaguars can stay at 56 and possibly end up with a player like Mason Reiger, who I described as being valuable and having a superpower of versatility as well as speed and quickness to go with his length. But he's also not an every down player at this point. He's a little bit like He's a little bit like the guys that I mentioned that he'd be replacing, but if you could boil them all into one. Jack Campbell is kind of like that a little bit, just a little bit, not a whole bunch, but sort of a tweener. Plays off the ball, but is a little bit long. I think he's more of an on-ball guy or more of a strong side guy. He'd probably be perfect for a 3-4 outside linebacker position, but the Jaguars don't run a 3-4. So, but the fact that I say that about Mason Reiger tells you about the duality. Use the guys that are those 3-4 Sam guys. That means they can play a little linebacker and they can also play a little edge rush. But the thing you really want them to do is to be a third pass rusher on a team. So I think he'd be solid. But one of those other guys, man, are probably more ready to go like right now. And it's more streamlined to who and what they are. They are an edge rusher. We ain't talking about covering people in the flat. We're just talking about pure, nasty, powerful football players. Both of those guys have, in my opinion, the same gene and DNA that Travon Walker has. So if you want, like, we're going to get more of the same because we need that character in the building. And we need guys that do what he does. If we had more guys like him and Josh, then we'd be better. That could very well be true. And if you want one of those guys and you want them for a longer period of time with a bigger commitment and they will eventually be a starter, then they're probably your people. Okay. But if you want that versatile piece, if you want to keep all the rest of your draft picks or use them in another way or use them somewhere else, and you say, I want to sit there at 56 and maybe not add a player that's just like one of those guys. Maybe go for something a little bit different, kind of like Chris Rodriguez Jr. He's not just like Travis Etienne. He's not. He's different. And it changes who we are and it changes what we look like. It doesn't make us necessarily worse, but it makes us different. Liam Cohen talked about the fact that they may lose more games. They might not win 13 games, but actually be a better team, which means the better team means that they can go further, built the way that they're built than they did here. So we ain't going to worry about the 11 games because, I mean, the 13 wins, because this is an entirely different year. You're going to catch people at an entirely different time, and you're going to have a first place schedule as a division winner. It's absolutely totally different. And all of those teams will seemingly change. The Raiders won't be the same team that they were last year. A lot of the teams that they played last year, that they won't be the same types of teams this year. So these teams will be a little bit different. And the Jaguars will be different. It's not always apples to apples when it comes to last year versus this year. So what you really want is players that you can recognize exactly what they offer you, especially when you're talking about the first player picked in the draft that you take in the draft, whether it's a first or second round pick. What does he give us now and later? So the question is, do they sit and wait or do they go? That depends on the discussions that are going on in that building. That also likely depends on exactly what superpower or what great thing that these guys all do. How does that help us now, as long as it doesn't sacrifice us in the future? So with that being said, it's a tough decision, man. But I believe the Jaguars have a chance to move up. I actually do. I think they have a chance to move up because I think there are some teams that don't believe there's a much difference between players after number 25 and before pick 60, and the Jaguars fall at 56. So for them to move up, they have to actually like the person. They have to target this guy and say, man, we can't live without him. I mean, we could, but we don't want to. We want to inject that into our veins. You know what I mean? We want to inject that into our DNA. We want that to be a part of our core, a part of our organization. We have to have not only all of the things that the person brings, not only the football stuff, but I want that guy, because it feels to me like in the pantheon of everyone trying to always define what football culture is, some of the times we forget football culture is made up by a bunch of individuals. One player can ruin your entire culture, or at least shake it up a little bit. So I think the aspect of who these guys are as people for the Jaguars matters, because contrary to their nice mannerisms, contrary to the elegant way that they speak, Contrary to the fact that they're not disrespectful, they don't walk around like Jack Nicholson in A Few Good Men. I ain't knocking nobody, but we have seen that. And just walk around like got this air of invincibility and this football god complex. They're very, very welcoming and very, very engaging. You can easily mistake that as them being the Mr. Rogers and being like really, really nice. And that's not the case. They don't have to yell. They don't have to act tough. This is all about competition. If you can play, you'll play. If you can't, we'll help you get your mojo back. But we got to win. So while you're going through whatever you're going through, man, we'll make a trade. We don't care what we paid you. If you ain't getting it done, we got to put somebody in there that will. We don't care what your contract says. We don't care where you were drafted. We're either going to win or we're going to lose. They're not going to get any points for you playing well because you got a lot of money or because you were first pick. The bottom, they're going to get points whether or not they get points, and they stop the other team from getting points. So if those are the scenarios and that's how the Jaguars are now moving, you have to understand that the people, the personalities, the temperament, all of those things matter because there's going to be challenges. They're going to push you. They're going to bring in competition. Everyone's going to have a role. Everyone's going to have a role to play. And sometimes your role might be the most dominant role that day. You might be the star player of this team that day. Go back and look at the tape. There were times when Ventrell Miller looked like he was the best defensive player on the team, and he wasn't even a full-time starter. Monteric Brown was out there last year rotating between corner and backup nickel, and then he ends up getting an $11 million per year contract. Travon didn't play as much because he had a club. And they said even though his numbers were low, the numbers didn't matter. They know what he is and know who he is. All of these things show you that they care more about they care more than caring about statistics. They care about actual production and how you go about your business each day. So therefore, who they go and get will likely be determined by the player that they trust and the player that helps their culture on and off the field. Make sure you keep up with us here on Locked On Jaguar Squad Show. With me, O'Brien, and Marcus Ogden is here once or twice a week whenever our schedule permits it. We at least get at you before the draft. I'm going to go to a luncheon tomorrow at the stadium. It's a pre-draft luncheon. I'll be down there. I'll adjust my recording schedule. And I'll do the Jaguar show after I go down there tomorrow. So it'll be in the afternoon. So you'll get a late afternoon edition of Locked On Jaguars. Make sure y'all hang in there, man, and tap in each and every day because it's your team every day. We thank you for making us your first listen. We wouldn't be able to do this without you the way that we do it.